Tyrel Johnson, 17, was violently beaten by 4 firefighters and seriously injured. And the cause of all this was that he launched an unprovoked attack on a 60-year-old grandmother. On June 18th, Tyrel was cycling when he suddenly turned and punched Martha Anderson in the face without any warning. After witnessing the attack, 4 firefighters immediately intervened, caught up with Tyrel, and pinned him to the ground. Bystanders called 911, and both Tyrel and Martha were rushed to the hospital. It is said that Tyrel suffered extensive bruising and a comminuted fracture of his left hand in this conflict. Fortunately, Martha has been discharged from the hospital after treatment and is not in danger of losing her life. Tyrel is currently facing charges of felony attack. However, his mother actually filed a lawsuit against the local fire department, demanding $1.5 million in compensation and claiming that the firefighters had used excessive force against her underage son. However, the court rejected the case. The judge praised the firefighters' actions as heroic and even stated that they deserved medals.
If you love dark stories, true crime, and the fight for truth, you're in the right place. Tap subscribe, like this video, and join the blood and justice community. It began with a 911 call from a quiet suburban street in the early hours of a summer morning. On the other end of the line was Marie Johnson, frantic, breathless, her voice trembling as she told dispatchers that her grandson, 17-year-old Tyrel Johnson, was out of control. Neighbors later said they could hear shouting long before the sirens came. Tyrel had been struggling for weeks, anger, confusion, episodes that frightened his family but never once made them stop loving him. He's not himself, his grandmother said. He just needs help. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, firefighters and EMTs trained in crisis response. Within minutes, the red glow of the engine lit up the cul-de-sac. But what happened next would turn a moment of desperation into a national debate. When first responders stepped inside that small brick house, Tyrel wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding his head, crying, pacing, begging them not to touch him. In less than 5 minutes, everything collapsed into chaos. By sunrise, the call for help had become a call for accountability. Tyrel Johnson would leave that house alive, but broken. Permanently disabled. And the people meant to save him would become the accused. The first firefighter through the door was Captain Rayner, a 20-year veteran, built like a wall, voice steady from years of command. Behind him, 3 more responders followed, flashlights cutting through the dim living room of Mather Henderson's house. "Ma'am, where is he?" Rayner asked. Mather pointed down the hall. Her hands were shaking. "Please," she said. "Just don't hurt him. He's sick, he needs help." Tyrel stood at the end of that hallway, shirtless, breathing heavy, eyes unfocused. His chest rose and fell like he'd been running for miles. "Back up," one firefighter said. "Let us handle this." But handle became the wrong word the second Tyrel flinched. The responders moved fast, too fast. One grabbed his arm, another pushed his shoulder. Tyrel screamed, twisting away. He wasn't fighting, he was panicking. What came next wasn't procedure. A thud. A crash. Then the sickening sound of something heavy hitting flesh. Mather tried to intervene, shouting that he couldn't breathe, but she was pushed aside. Within minutes, the floor was smeared with blood. By the time police arrived, the scene under control was anything but. Tyrel lay face down, motionless, and the men who were supposed to save him stood staring, silent, their gloves red. By the time the first police cruiser arrived, the house was silent except for the hum of the oxygen machine in the corner. The officers walked into chaos, broken glass, a toppled lamp, droplets of blood leading down the hall. Mather Henderson sat on the couch, clutching a towel to her lip, whispering prayers under her breath. They wouldn't stop, she kept saying. He was crying. He said he couldn't breathe. On the floor, Tyrel lay limp, his body covered in bruises and burn marks from the taser. His pulse was faint. His left arm bent wrong. The firefighters stood off to the side, silent, staring at the wall. Their uniforms stained, their radios still buzzing. When the officers asked what happened, Captain Rayner said the same line he would repeat in every report afterward. "He attacked us first." But Mather's voice cut through the noise. "That's a lie," she cried. "He never touched them. He was scared." The officer's body cam recorded every word, every glance, every contradiction. Later, when the footage was reviewed frame by frame, it revealed something no one expected. Tyrel's hands were open the entire time. Not clenched. Not raised. Open. Pleading. 2 days after the incident, the story was still local, a vague report on page 6 of the county paper. Teen injured during domestic disturbance. No one outside of that neighborhood knew the name Tyrel Johnson. But that changed when a 47-second clip surfaced on social media. It wasn't police footage. It came from a neighbor's security camera, positioned just right to see through the living room window. The video showed the firefighters forcing their way inside, voices raised. Then, muffled sounds, shouting, crashing, and finally, one voice yelling, "Stop hitting him!" That voice belonged to Mather Henderson. Within hours, the clip spread everywhere. Hashtags exploded. Protesters gathered outside the fire station with signs that read "Serve and Protect, not Attack." The department went into lockdown. Captain Rayner was placed on leave. 2 others resigned overnight. Reporters swarmed the small house where Mather lived, her porch light flickering as she whispered to cameras, "I called for help, and they broke him." By the end of the week, Tyrel's name was trending across the country. And what began as a local tragedy had become a national reckoning. Within a week, the state attorney general's office announced a formal investigation into the incident involving 17-year-old Tyrel Johnson. The firefighters claimed they followed standard restraint procedures. But the leaked footage, and Mather Henderson's eyewitness account, told a different story. The city's mayor called it deeply troubling. Civil rights attorneys called it something else entirely. A beating disguised as protocol. The Johnson family hired attorney Melissa Carter, a former federal prosecutor known for exposing police abuse cases. Carter's first move was to subpoena all body cam and station house radio transmissions from that night. What she received changed everything. In the recordings, a responder can be heard saying, "We got him down. He's not moving." Another replies, laughing, "Good. Maybe he'll think twice next time." The words hit like a bullet through the public's trust. Outside the fire department headquarters, protesters returned, louder, angrier, holding photos of Tyrel in his basketball jersey. His grandmother watched from her porch, silent. For her, it wasn't politics. It wasn't headlines. It was a wound that would never close. "They didn't just break him," she told a reporter quietly. "They broke everything." When Tyrel Johnson arrived at the county trauma center, doctors were told he had fallen during a domestic disturbance. But the scans told another story. Fractures to the orbital bone. 2 broken ribs. A dislocated shoulder. Internal bruising consistent with multiple strikes, not a fall. The report listed the cause of injury as repetitive blunt force trauma. In simple words, he was beaten. Mather Henderson sat by his bedside for days, her hand resting on his bandaged wrist. He couldn't speak. Tubes and machines did the talking for him. "They told me he was stable," she said later. "But I could see he wasn't." When investigators compared the hospital report with the first responders' statements, nothing lined up. The firefighters said Tyrel charged at them. But his right leg was fractured before the first strike landed. They said he resisted arrest. But no police officer had even arrived yet. The final page of the medical file contained one chilling note from the trauma surgeon. "Injuries inconsistent with self-defense or restraint technique." That single sentence became the foundation for a criminal case that would shake the department to its core. As pressure mounted, the city scrambled to control the story. At a hastily arranged press conference, the fire chief stood behind a podium, flanked by city officials and legal counsel. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Was excessive force used? Why were firefighters handling a psychiatric call without police presence? The chief's response was short and rehearsed. Our men followed proper procedure under difficult circumstances. He refused to take further questions. Behind the scenes, City Hall circulated internal memos instructing staff to avoid public commentary and refer all inquiries to the legal department. But the silence only fueled the fire. Across social media, hashtags like #JusticeForTyrel and #MatherDeservesAnswers began trending nationwide. Outside the mayor's office, a crowd gathered: teachers, neighbors, nurses, even off-duty police officers. They held candles. They held signs. And they held the truth that the city refused to speak aloud. We watched the video, one protester said. We saw what they did. You can't PR spin that kind of violence. The city thought the outrage would fade. But they underestimated a grandmother's voice and a nation's anger. 10 days after the beating, the investigation took a sudden turn. A firefighter from the same station, Evan Morales, 34, father of 2, walked into the district attorney's office carrying a manila envelope. Inside were copies of internal messages and handwritten shift reports from the night Tyrel Johnson was injured. Morales said he couldn't stay quiet anymore. We weren't trained for that kind of call, he told investigators. We were told to subdue, not to help. He described how Captain Rayner ordered his team to get the kid down, how punches were thrown long after Tyrel had stopped moving, and how the official report was rewritten before it was submitted. His testimony shattered the department's defense. In one of the leaked text messages, a senior firefighter wrote, "Delete your footage. They'll twist it anyway." The DA's office confirmed the evidence was authentic. Within hours, subpoenas went out. Hard drives were seized. Evan Morales was placed on unpaid leave, but to the public, he became something else, a reluctant hero. For the first time, someone on the inside had spoken the truth. Tyrel wasn't a threat. He was a victim. And the people who beat him had help covering it up. The morning of the arrests began like any other, until unmarked cars rolled quietly into Station 47. One by one, the men who'd once worn the city's emblem on their sleeves were let out in handcuffs. Captain Rayner, charged with felony assault and official misconduct. Firefighter Greg Lomas, charged with obstruction of justice. Paramedic Luke Ellis, charged with falsifying incident reports. It was the first time in the city's history that firefighters were charged for an act of excessive force. As they were escorted into custody, protesters gathered outside the station gates, chanting Tyrel's name. The chief released a brief statement. "We respect the process and remind the public that all are innocent until proven guilty." But the community wasn't asking for reminders. They were asking for accountability. At the courthouse, Mather Henderson stood at the front of the crowd, clutching a framed photo of Tyrel before the attack, young, smiling, full of life. When reporters asked what justice meant to her, she answered softly. "Justice is him walking again. Justice is him smiling again. Until then, this isn't over." And it wasn't. Because as the arrests made headlines across the country, a new investigation began, not into what the men did, but who let them get away with it for so long. As prosecutors built their case against the firefighters, investigators turned their attention to City Hall. What they found wasn't incompetence, it was coordination. Internal emails showed senior officials discussing how to contain the fallout days before the video leaked. One message from a deputy city attorney read, "We should limit public access to the footage until the narrative stabilizes." Another email, marked confidential, instructed the fire department's media office to pause all cooperation with reporters and to protect the integrity of our personnel. Protect, not the victim, but the accused. Investigators even uncovered a private meeting between the fire chief, the city's legal advisor, and a communications director, held just hours after Mather Henderson's first interview aired. The memo from that meeting included a chilling line. Public sympathy is shifting. Find a way to humanize the responders. It was never about finding the truth. It was about saving face. When the documents became public, the city's mayor was forced to issue an apology. But for many, it was too late. The people had seen enough. The mask was gone. And what stared back at them was a system more concerned with its image than with justice. The trial began 6 months after the incident. The courtroom was overflowing, reporters in every seat, cameras lined up outside, and Tyrel's supporters filling the hallway with handmade signs. At the center of it all sat Mather Henderson, her hands folded in her lap, the photograph of her grandson resting on her knees. The prosecution opened with the footage, the body cam, the neighbors recording, and the medical reports. Every frame was shown on a large monitor, every sound echoing in the silent courtroom. When the video ended, the prosecutor turned to the jury and said, "This wasn't an accident. This was a beating, one a child never recovered from." The defense argued that the firefighters acted under stress, that Tyrel was violent and unpredictable. But cross-examination destroyed that story. Attorney Melissa Carter played the radio transmission, the one where a responder laughed and said, "Good. Maybe he'll think twice next time." The courtroom went still. Even the defendants looked away. For days, witness after witness testified, paramedics, neighbors, doctors, even firefighter Evan Morales, the whistleblower. Each one painted the same picture. Tyrel didn't need to be restrained. He needed to be understood. By the second week, the truth wasn't in doubt. Only the verdict was. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was silent, a silence that felt like it might never end. The clerk read the verdicts one by one. Captain Rayner, guilty of felony assault. Greg Lomas, guilty of obstruction of justice. Luke Ellis, guilty of falsifying official reports. Gasps rippled through the room. Mather Henderson covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp, final. The men were led away in cuffs, the same way Tyrel had been left, restrained, helpless. Outside, crowds erupted in applause and anger at once, joy for accountability, sorrow for what it took to get there. The city finally called it justice. But Mather called it a start. Sentencing day arrived under heavy clouds. The firefighters stood before the judge in orange jumpsuits, no longer heroes, no longer saviors, just men stripped of power. Captain Rayner received 12 years. Lomas, 5. Ellis, 3. The judge's words were measured but heavy. Your duty was to protect life. Instead, you destroyed it. Outside, protesters cheered, but inside, Mather sat still. "It won't bring my boy back," she whispered. "But maybe it'll stop someone else's from being hurt." The courtroom emptied slowly, echoing with the sound of footsteps, the kind of sound that lingers after justice has spoken but peace has not. In the months that followed, the city of Brookfield passed new reforms. Firefighters and EMTs were retrained in crisis de-escalation and mental health response. The department installed new oversight cameras, and every emergency call involving minors now required a police liaison. Streets once divided by anger began to heal, slowly. Mather Henderson became an advocate, speaking at universities, town halls, anywhere people would listen. "I called for help," she'd tell them, and they answered with violence. Don't let that be anyone else's story. Tyrel's case changed more than policy, it changed people. It reminded a nation watching online that accountability begins where excuses end. Every year, candles line the street outside Mather Henderson's home. Neighbors gather, holding photos of Tyrel Johnson, whispering prayers into the night. His story isn't just about what happened, it's about what must never happen again. And that's why Blood and Justice exists, to tell the stories others turn away from. If this story moved you, share it, so his name is never forgotten. Like the video to help it reach more people who still believe in truth. And subscribe to join a growing community that demands accountability, compassion, and real change. Because silence protects no one. This is Blood and Justice.